Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So today we're heading again to Kaladesh Standard to check out a really sweet deck that was 100% made possible by Kaladesh. There's so many new cards in this deck, it just couldn't exist without the Kaladesh set being in Standard. So it's pretty exciting to see all this new stuff in action. This is Blue-Black Colossus, and this deck was played by Team Nexus at the SCG Open this weekend, put up some good finishes. If you want a more in-depth discussion of this deck, I know one of their team members, Emma Handy, is going to be publishing an article on Star City Games this week, breaking down the intricacies of the deck. So if you want a more in-depth discussion, make sure to check out her article on Star City Games. Anyway, a quick reminder before we break down the deck. If you enjoy this deck and you want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So Blue-Black Colossus is built around Metalwork Colossus, an 11 mana 10/10 that gets cheaper by X, where X is a total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control, and then you get to sack artifacts, 2 of them, to get it back from your graveyard to your hand if you need to. So the idea of this card is it almost has this weird affinity, like affinity for artifacts, sort of. So if you can get a bunch of non-creature artifacts on the battlefield, all of a sudden you have this huge 10/10, which is either going to be an amazing blocker or force your opponent to chump block again and again and again, because it's just so huge that you're casting for not very much mana. 2 mana, 4 mana, 0 mana. And then if somehow your opponent deals with it, or it dies in combat, then you can just sack artifacts to get it back. So this is one of the key pieces of the deck. You also get a couple Elder Deep Fiends as a backup finisher. Works pretty well with Colossus. If you get a Colossus or 2 on the battlefield, Elder Deep Fiend can tap down all your opponent's stuff, so you can get in with the Colossuses. They're not getting chump blocked. Just a good card overall. So how does this deck go about making Metalwork Colossus cheap? Well, the trick is it gets to play a bunch of artifacts which are non-creature artifacts but can also become creatures with the vehicles. So this allows the deck to pay that kind of affinity cost on Metalwork Colossus while also having things that can attack and block when necessary. So Smuggler's Copter just dominated the first week of Standard. It's so good. So it's a 2 converted mana cost non-creature artifact, becomes a 3/3 flyer, lets you loot. It's just so good. Sky Sovereign, 5 converted mana cost non-creature artifact that can also become a 6/5 flyer and shoot down some stuff. And Cultivator's Caravan is a really sneaky good card. It's a 3 mana rock that can also randomly become a 5/5. So you can use it as a mana rock to pay the mana cost of Metalwork Colossus and other things, can also become a reasonably sized beater if need be. So these non-creature artifacts that can also go on the attack and play defense allow the Metalwork Colossus to be cheap enough that you can actually cast it for a very low amount of mana. Also have Hedron Archive, which adds 4 to the non-creature artifact total converted mana cost while also adding 2 mana and also letting you draw a couple cards if you need to. And Prophetic Prism is super sweet. It doesn't cost you a card because you draw a card when it enters the battlefield. It kind of fixes your mana. It's not super important in that regard, but it's an artifact that doesn't cost anything, makes your Metalwork Colossus cheaper, and then in the late game, it's pretty much something you can sacrifice for free to get Metalwork Colossus back to your hand from the graveyard. So that's kind of the Metalwork Colossus package. We also have Foundry Inspector and Scrap Heap Scrounger. Makes artifacts cheaper, makes your vehicles cheaper, makes your Metalwork Colossus cheaper, just kind of speeds everything up significantly. And a couple of Scrap Heap Scroungers, which is another good artifact to sack to get your Metalwork Colossus back from the graveyard, because you can always get the Scrap Heap Scrounger back by eating another creature and paying 1 in a black. For removal, you got 4 Spatial Contortions, takes advantage of the fact that the deck has a ton of colorless mana, so it's really easy to cast in this deck. In the mana base, we get some lands that do cool things. Sanctum of Ugin lets the deck cast a Metalwork Colossus, search up another Metalwork Colossus, cast the Metalwork Colossus, search up another Metalwork Colossus by sacking it, so you can kind of chain together your Colossuses, and if you have enough non-creature artifacts on the battlefield, they're going to be free, so you can just go from basically 0 power on the board to having multiple 10/10s on the battlefield. Can also search up your Elder Deep Fiend. Adventure's Fair, another way to tutor artifacts, gains you a bit of life. Gaia Reach Sanitarium for some looting, and Spawning Bed, another colorless land, can make some creatures. The Colored mana in the deck comes from Ether Hub, Sunken Hollow, and Islands. As far as the sideboard, Ceremonious Rejection fights against other colorless decks. Smuggler's Copter is essentially the best card in Standard right now, or the most played card, literally in the top 8 of this weekend's tournament. 32 of a possible 32 copies were in the top 8. Literally every single deck in the top 8 was playing as a 4 of, so this counters that, counters other vehicles, counters other artifacts. Then we have kind of the aggro package. Consulate Skygate, a good early game blocker with reach, so it stops the Smuggler's Copter. Filigree Familiar can gain a bit of life, good with emerging your Elder Deep Fiend, same with Matter Reshaper. And then Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher can be big, powerful, disruptive threats in more slow, controlling matchups, and just one Sky Sovereign to round out the sideboard. So that is Blue-Black Colossus for Kaladesh Standard, and that's been our Instant Deck Tech for today. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.